When my daughter said I wasn't suitable for her engagement dinner, I didn't argue. I opened my credit report and found an $80,000 business loan with my name and their signatures. By the weekend, 12 white envelopes and one navy suit were ready. My RSVP read, "Attending, bringing a gift." They toasted family support. I raised my glass to receipts. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The little ting from the laptop sliced through the morning hush like a cold knife. I reached for the ceramic Ducker One Dad mug, my fingertip landing on the tiny chip at the rim, the spot where Layla dropped it in 5th grade. The kitchen in Casper still smelled of black coffee and dry wood. The warm yellow light poured over the work table I built myself, exposing faint pencil marks from measuring lumber. I opened my inbox. The subject line appeared: engagement guest adjustments, final list update, sender, Layla Grayson. I clicked it open. The words were polite, sterile, each sentence wiped down with alcohol. She was afraid I wouldn't feel comfortable, the particular atmosphere I might not need to attend. At the bottom was love, Layla, a dry kiss sealed onto an empty envelope. I sat up straight so I wouldn't get lightheaded. My heart missed a beat, then another. The gap between beats stretched long as the wind outside the window. I didn't reply. I hit call. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Do you truly not want me there?" I said, my voice hoarse from a sleepless night. The other end went quiet for a moment, as if she'd set a hand over the rim of a cup to dam the water's sound. Then Layla spoke. "I didn't say that. It's just there will be a lot of people from tech, partners. I'm afraid you won't feel comfortable." In the middle of her sentence, a man's voice slid in, smooth as oil. "Mr. Hector, this party isn't the kind of wear flannel and eat roast chicken. We need a professional vibe." I nodded slightly, though they couldn't see me, as if to tuck a sigh into the bones of my neck. I wasn't planning on wearing flannel, but thank you for the reminder. A small silence, like a slight frown. Then Layla, smaller. "I just don't want to be judged as a working-class family." My chest pinched short, like someone flicked an old bruise. I looked at the yellowed wall clock. 9:17. "I understand," I said. That was all. The call ended with a very small click. I sat still, letting my heartbeat find its own way back. The oven door glass threw back my face. Eyes sunk deeper. The corners of my mouth slid down a notch. A strange tremor in my chin. I lifted the One Dad mug again, but the coffee had gone cold. Beside the sink was my wife's old terry towel, still carrying the scent of the cheap dish soap she liked because it smelled like real lemon. I turned toward the fridge. October's electric bill pinned by a red magnet right next to the sticky note where Layla drew a turkey in 1st grade. The turkey belly colored past the lines. On the shelf, a photo of the 3 of us in this kitchen. Layla wearing a paper turkey hat, standing on a chair to scoop mashed potatoes. My wife pretending to scold her because buttery fingers touched the counter. And me holding the cake knife, smiling so hard the crow's feet looked penciled in. 3 is warm enough, my wife had said, hiding a laugh in her mouth. Funny how today the kitchen is warm enough, and yet 1 seat is plainly missing. The phone buzzed. A post from Brandon. "Thank you to the pioneering investors who believed in us. We won't let you down. Shocker Y-Bridge launch. Shocker legacy builders. No tag for me. No need." Their particular atmosphere probably couldn't hold the smell of a carpenter's sweat. I had the brief urge to clear the table, wash the mug, do something noisy to press down the expanding emptiness. But my hands were already opening the laptop. Habit is the hardest thing to break. When in doubt, I verify. I typed Experian and logged in. The spinner circled for a long time. The old machine's fan whined lightly like my own grinding teeth. Then the line appeared. Neat, cold, clarity bordering on cruelty. Business loan, $80,000. Signer guarantor, Hector Grayson. The air in the room dropped like an elevator shaft door suddenly opening. I read it again, a third time. Sweat prickled down my nape. I pushed the chair back. My knee buckled into the edge of the cabinet. A straight line of pain. 80,000. My name. No misplaced decimal. I stared at the numbers the way you look at a stranger wearing your face. Who signed for me? When? Why didn't I know? My heart skipped a few more beats and started thudding against the left rib like a rubber mallet. I hit redial immediately. Layla, are you with Brandon right now? I kept my voice level. My name is on an $80,000 loan. Explain. Rustling and whispering on the other end. Then Layla, trying to sound bright. Dad, Brandon says that's just a temporary formality. After the party, we'll update everything. Please don't make a scene, okay? In that "don't make a scene" was a tiny sound like a finger flicking the surface of water. Carelessness. Brandon slid in, voice soft as latte foam. Sir, every startup needs flexibility. The bank asked for a guarantor with credibility. It's just to unlock cash flow. After the seed round, we'll adjust it right away. I heard my heart thud once against my chest. I set a hand on the table and felt the woods cold. My credibility is not the backup card in your wallet, I said slowly, and my signature isn't a picture for you to trace. Layla exhaled. Dad, I'm entertaining guests right now. Can you please wait until after the party? I promise we'll smooth it. I felt my mouth tug down at one corner, like the hairline crack in the mug's glaze. I stopped looking for words. I looked for air. All right, I said. I'll prepare my part. I hung up. Silence flooded fast like a busted levee. I touched my face, hot and beneath the heat, cold. People probably call that shame. Not for being turned away from a party, but for having my name taken without asking. My wife used to say, silence isn't consent. I've been quiet too long. I didn't go for the file cabinet yet. I washed the Dr. One Dad mug. Warm water ran over ceramic, over the chip, over the slightly scuffed dad. I set it upside down on the rack next to the round plate with the knife scratch I still leave there. A notch to remember dinners with the clink of spoons from the two women I loved most. I dried my hands on my wife's towel and folded it back along the old crease. I went back to the table and opened Spotify. Take Me Home Country Roads came on. The guitar like someone knocking at the door frame and no one answering. I let the song move through me like wind. Then I shut it off. I turned on the printer. I didn't need a stack of documents yet. Just one thing to remind me this feeling was real. I printed the report page with the 80,000 line in my name. The sheet slid out, smooth and cold. The printer's steady hum like another heart in the kitchen. I held the paper and read my name one more time. This time I whispered, letting the words find their footing in the room. Thanksgiving used to be full of noise. This silence, they chose it. I set the paper against the family frame so the two stood side by side. Warm and cold, loud and quiet. What was and what is. I opened the freezer, took out a small bag of ice, and pressed it to the spot on my knee that hit the cabinet. The sting eased slowly, the way every injury demands time and breath. I sat down and looked through the small window frame. The first snow felt like salt shaken, dusting the sill in a thin layer. I told myself, no need to raise my voice. Measure twice, cut once. Don't sprint around scooping up every bill like someone chasing a fire. First stand still and smell what's burning. The smell of arrogance, the smell of ingratitude, and a scent I know by heart. Patience. I pulled the black case from under the chair and set it on the table. Didn't open it. I let my hand rest on its lid, heard the printer hush now, heard the wind snake through the door seam. After graduation, Layla once wrote me a thank you card. Dad, you're my hero. The card is still in the second drawer. I know exactly where. I haven't taken it out. I'm not ready to set hero next to not a good fit. Their party will be missing one person. and my life will have one plan too many. I stood, topped off the kettle, set it on the stove. The blue flame kissed the kettle's bottom, ticking. While I waited for the boil, I took a pencil and wrote on a small scrap, "My name is not decoration." I stuck it beside the screen. When the water boiled, I turned off the stove. Outside, the snow had thickened by a thin slice. I touched the door and felt its cool. I drew a long breath. Let the cold move into my lungs, down into my stomach, then dissolve in my lower belly where the sadness had been sitting. I folded the 80,000 printout and slid it into a plastic sleeve, not to brandish, but to remember. This numbness needs an address. Tomorrow I'll call the bank, ask about the signature, look at the file. But tonight I allow myself one thing: lay a hand on the table and admit my heart's been stabbed, and it's still beating. The printer went fully silent, leaving quiet thickening like a blanket. I breathed slow. I looked around the kitchen, the Matcha One Dad mug drying, the frame still upright, the 80,000 sheet close by. I angled the lamp down, turned the others off so there was a single amber pool on the corner where I'd sit and write tomorrow's list. The wooden table I built doesn't wobble. It will hold the weight of whatever's set on it, including me. I sat in the small study where old file folders filled the wooden shelves. The desk lamp was colder than the kitchen light. It shone straight onto the family photo tucked beneath the edge of the glass, making my wife's smile look thinner. Beside the computer sat a scuffed leather notebook, the neat handwriting of my wife on the first page. No signature, no responsibility. I laid my hand on the cover and felt the pulse under my skin still racing from last night. An afternoon 2 years ago, Layla leaned against the doorframe, arms around her laptop, eyes bright with worry. "Dad, can I borrow your name to open a bank account for the startup?" "Just paperwork, temporary." Brandon followed a step behind, bowing his head to thank you for trusting the new generation. Back then, I only smiled and told them not to do anything foolish. I didn't ask much. People don't build walls inside their own home until the draft blows straight across the bed. Today, that draft had become a storm. I pulled the chair in close and typed in the case number from Experian that I'd scribbled down last night. The screen surfaced another branch of information. Y Bridge EdTech LLC, business loan $80,000. Guarantor, Hector Grayson. Title, co-founder. I blinked. The word co-founder sat there, black and flat as a porch paver. Only this paver had been laid with my name and without any mortar. I leaned back and heard the wooden chair creak. My heart gave one short stab, then held. Don't boast. Measure. Carpentry taught me that. So I measured. I saved the page, downloaded the PDF, highlighted the co-founder line, took screenshots. On the right, my old Quicken program popped open with blue and red boxes. How many months of transfers? How many notes marked Layla, Brandon, veining the screen like leaf lines? I didn't let myself sink into those colors. Today wasn't a day for settling scores. Today was a day for reading names. I dialed Rocky Mountain Credit Union. The hold music trickled on in an old-fashioned way. When a middle-aged woman picked up, I gave my name. "I need to verify a business loan that lists me," I said slowly, keeping my breath even. "I don't recall signing anything. Let me verify your information first. Date of birth? Last four of your SSN? Current address?" I recited them. I heard keys clacking, and then a silence stretching like a rubber band. "I see an account linked to the company, Y Bridge EdTech LLC. There's a guarantee agreement. The signature." She paused. "I can send you the scan if you confirm your email." "Send it right away, please." While I waited for the email, I listened to my own breath in the receiver. Short, long, then held. A small pinch at my left chest again. Light, but enough to force a beat's pause. I cracked the blinds. Last night's snow hadn't melted, freckling the roof of the old Chevy outside like scattered salt. The email arrived. I opened it. A signature trying to mimic my handwriting, good enough to convince a stranger, but the tail stroke dragged too deep, like someone bowing lower than necessary. I zoomed in. I watched myself being imitated right in front of me. "Could you connect me to a manager?" I asked evenly. "Yes, please hold." The music returned. I laid a hand on my chest and counted to 5. The manager came on, careful voice. I asked for full printed statements and set an in-person appointment. "I'll be at the downtown branch in an hour. We'll be expecting you." I grabbed my coat and keys. The 2002 Chevy Silverado started on the second try. A little flag-shaped air freshener swung under the rearview mirror, breathing out a sharp pine smell. The morning road was wet and cold. The tires crackled over the thin crust of snow. I drove slowly, my hands gripping the wheel as if I were holding on to a fact my mouth wasn't used to yet. Co-founder. I turned the radio on low to let voices warm the windshield. Then I shut it off because I needed to hear my own. The Rocky Mountain Credit Union branch glowed warm yellow. The glass door reflected the way I walked a little hunched from the cold. The woman at the counter gave a polite smile. Her name was Maria, the same as my wife's, which made my palms flare hot for a second. "Mr. Grayson, we printed your file. Right this way." I sat, papers laid out, in order. Page 3 was the signature scan. I leaned in. Maria leaned in too, her eyes going from paper to my face and back again, as if she also saw something wrong, but was only allowed to say half a sentence. "Her policy," she said softly, "if you believe this is a forged signature, the bank will file a report and recommend you work with a credit attorney. On this line, you can see the final stroke doesn't match the signatures previously in our system." "Thank you," I said. "I'll need stamped copies, every relevant page." The manager appeared to sign and stamp. He didn't ask many questions, but when he handed me the packet, his eyes held mine one beat longer, like an apology that couldn't be spoken. I nodded, slid the papers into a hard folder. Not a page slipped. Outside the bank, I didn't drive off right away. I sat in the truck and let the heater wash the steering wheel. The old vinyl smell, the pine card, the melt of snow. It all mixed and brought back the scent of the wood shop in my apprentice days. Patience. I pulled out my phone and opened ybridgeedu.com. Clean interface, glossy images, an about page written in beautiful sentences. "We believe education is a bridge, led by founders with deep financial experience." Brandon's photo grinned like he just won an easy hand. "Company registered address." I read it out loud. Layla's apartment. I zoomed the last line. "Co-founder Hector Grayson." I laughed, this time with sound. A short laugh, dry and cracked in the middle, like a pencil tip snapping from too much pressure. I captured the screen, saved the whole page as a PDF, even downloaded the page source for good measure. Not because I'm tech savvy, because I'm good at keeping evidence. Back home, I carried the folder into the study and set it on the desk. I opened the safe and took out my wife's old notebook. In the middle, she'd tucked a tuition bill with a red note. "Layla, final semester, paid in full with Dad's extra shifts." I placed the bill beside the freshly stamped documents. Something warm and salty rose in my throat. I swallowed and heard the swallow. I stuck a note in the middle of the screen. No signature, no responsibility. Then I opened Quicken. The blue and red boxes jumped up. I skimmed without stopping at the amounts. I just read the labels. Last year's porch roof repair, the double burner range from the year before, the annual software subscription. Brandon said, without it, the system won't run. I remembered each time I hit send. Every click a nod no one heard. The phone buzzed. An email from the bank. The scans attached. I dragged the signature file next to the screenshot of the About page. The two sat side by side like wedding photos with the names swapped. I cracked the window a little to let cold edge the screen. The cold helps me say less, but say it right. I drafted an email to Layla. Subject line, "Whose signature is this?" In the body, I didn't lecture. I attached the signature scan and the unusual credit report I requested this morning, and I typed one sentence, then paused. I felt my heart pause half a beat too, asking if I should soften. No. I finished the line. Do you want me to keep quiet? I read it 3 times. I hit send. I checked the clock. 3:12 p.m. Winter light crawled across the floor into a long stripe. I closed my wife's notebook and put it back in the safe. My left knee still ached from banging the cabinet edge this morning. I propped it on a chair and set a small ice pack there. The phone buzzed as soon as I put the ice down. Layla. I watched my daughter's name light up and go dark, light up, go dark. I set the phone face down, not to hide because I was doing something more important than that call. Opening a new tab. I typed, how to report financial fraud using your identity. The browser suggested a few items from credit bureaus and some hotlines. I bookmarked them. I wrote on paper, Step 1, fraud report. Step 2, credit freeze. Step 3, credit attorney. I put the pencil down and heard the tip touch the wooden desk. A small sound, clear as a promise. I leaned back. The room was as empty as a lumberyard after a frame's been set. Outside the window, snow began to fall again, steady and fine. The pain in my chest eased, not because I forgave, because I'd chosen my stance, no longer facing the kitchen to breathe the old smell, but facing the door, watching the white road, where I'll drive my Chevy in the morning. Morning pulled into my kitchen on a chill thin as mist. I brewed coffee, listened to the soft tick of boiling water, and felt the bitter scent tighten over my hands. The printer sat still in the corner of the table, its textured plastic lid waiting to be touched. I set the mug down beside my wife's leather-bound notebook and opened to the first page. Silence is not consent. Don't let anyone mistake your restraint for being easy. No. The only time we ever had a loud fight was when I let my nephew use my name to buy a car. Today that sentence returned, not to scold, but to point the way. I powered the machine on, not to go online and argue. I powered it on to measure. I gathered last night's pages, still warm in memory like fresh ink, into a stack and set it to my right. The coffee sat at my left. Between them was just enough empty space for a decision. I would collect evidence, piece by piece, layer by layer, with a silence that grew larger. First, the tools. I drove the Chevy along a road dusted with snow and turned into the small electronics shop on Midwest Street. The bell chimed. The air swam with the smell of new plastic and solder. Eddie, the owner, who once bought shelves I built, looked up and smiled. Long time no see, Hector. Back to self-recording a podcast? Something like that, I said, letting my mouth hitch up to be polite. I picked out a mini voice recorder, a 32 GB USB drive, and a handheld scanner. Eddie rang me up and stapled 2 corners of the receipt like he was binding a page. Need me to walk you through it? I can read, I said. Thanks. He slid the bag over and patted the counter. Paper is power, friend. I know, I said, and silence carries farther. Before I left, I turned back and asked for a pack of white labels. Eddie arched a brow. Spotlights need names in the right place. I nodded. Back home, I set the recorder on the desk like I was placing a second eye. I tested the battery. The red light jumped once. I opened my contacts and looked at Layla's name. My finger paused on the screen, my heart dropping half a beat, a comma in the body. I hit call and started recording before I spoke. Layla, I still don't understand. Why do you need to borrow $80,000? I asked evenly, like asking for a recipe. On the other end, Layla sighed, a breath with an edge. You know startups. The faster you scale, the more capital you need. Brandon's handling it. He said you wouldn't make a fuss. Between the words, wouldn't make, I heard a glass set on a paneled table. Then a man's voice, distant but clear. Tell him we've got a plan. He's easygoing. I watched the recorder's red light blink and felt my left chest cinch, as if someone pulled a string. All right, I said. I hear you. Great. There's a plan. I hung up. My hand kept its holding shape, hovering a few seconds before it lowered. I saved the file. Clip1.wav. The sound of a single sigh sat neatly in memory, like a tiny splinter not yet removed but already mapped. Next, the company records. I went to the county clerk's office. Low ceiling, the familiar smell of old paper like a classroom from long ago. The clerk was a woman with fine wire glasses. Her badge read Carlene. I explained that I needed the complete formation file for Y-Bridge EdTech LLC, all exhibits, all personnel filings. Carlene typed, her eyes tracking the loading bar. There's an email filed submission with an e-signature. Oh, it lists Hector Grayson, co-founder. She hesitated. I need certified copies, and if possible, print the metadata, I said. We can do that. She nodded. When the printer started, she tilted her head at me, her voice smaller. I'm guessing you didn't sign these. I'm collecting the facts, I said. We'll let the words talk to each other. She smiled faintly, not for joy, but in understanding. She stamped the upper right in red and handed me the warm stack. The red ink on white sat like a clean cut. I signed the receipt of copies, my signature exact in every stroke, to compare tomorrow with whatever someone had imitated. On the way back, I stopped at the UPS print center to set up a USB print account. The print counter smelled of fresh toner and pulp. The touchscreen asked for paperweight, cover stock, binding. The clerk asked how many sets. I said 12. That made him look up, curious. I just smiled. Put each recipient's name on the top right corner. Regina, the Whitaker couple, Mr. Steele at the club, Ms. Ann next door. The whole set. What cover stock? White cover, hefty, black type, clear. Add the corner labels, I said, handing over the pack I bought from Eddie. Print the names in all caps. He tapped a few keys, and the wide format printer began to run, the pull of paper steady like a ventilator. I watched the black letters appear on the white, each letter a brick. I counted to 12, then added one more. A spare set. At home, I opened the laptop, hooked up the handheld scanner, and scanned each page with the forged signature, every line that said co-founder. I switched the browser to DuckDuckGo, searching like someone who didn't want to leave footprints. Layla's Facebook came up, a photo of her and Brandon in front of a neon sign. She said yes, her cheek on his shoulder, her smile like she'd been promised the sky. Under last year's post, another status, thank you, Dad, for believing in us. No tag for me. The comments were loud. Didn't know Mr. Hector is an investor too. I laughed. A clip sound like a snapped pencil tip. I downloaded everything. I combed through my old inbox and found a few emails Layla had sent. Do you trust me, Dad? That question back then wasn't to ask for more trust. It was to lock my mouth shut. I pulled the rocking chair out to the porch. Casper's afternoon was dry cold, the sun sliced by the line of pines. I set a small notebook on my thigh and wrote, company name, Y-Bridge EdTech LLC, transfer account number. 7423, date of false signing, take from metadata. Audio clip 1, Layla plus Brandon's voice in the background. Facebook evidence. Thank you, Dad. Post. She said yes, photo. I circled the last line. Official launch, engagement party. 12 guests. Printed files ready. The pencil rasped on paper, dry and sure, like the teeth of a saw in the shop. Every loop of the circle was a wire tightening around my name until it stopped wobbling. I built the list of 12 recipients on the cover. Regina Jenkins, future mother-in-law. Cody Jenkins, Mr. Steele, Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Whitaker, Ann, neighbor, James, Brandon's friend, Linda, partner, Sister Mary at church, Walter the blacksmith, Neil at the club, Layla's old classmate. Not everyone mattered the same, but each name was a mirror. You can't hide much when the mirror sits in the middle of the dinner table. When the sunlight pulled off the steps, I went back inside. The kitchen had the smell of cold coffee and fresh paper. I opened my phone, selected the forged signature image, and attached the About page from Ybridge EDU, where my name sat on the co-founder line. I opened a message window and typed slowly so my heart could keep pace with my hand. Thanks for believing I wouldn't do anything. You were wrong. I sent it to Brandon. The red receipt popped up as fast as the blink of a man telling himself he's still in control. I set the phone face down, not to avoid anything, but to hear the silence better. The printer in the study started up again. I'd scheduled the Regina future mother-in-law packet. White cover, black type, recipient's name in the top right corner. I laid a document bag on the table, careful as setting a newly honed knife into a wooden tray. The sky dimmed. Wind slipped through the door seam like a reminder. Don't rush. I brewed a fresh pot of tea. Steam rose and blurred quickly. I replayed Clip One Ton Want Wav, listened to Layla's edged sigh and Brandon's voice. He's easy going. I didn't scrub through. I let it run. By the end, I realized my hand had closed into a ring, like holding a small screw so it wouldn't drop. I let go. My left chest felt heavy, but the beat was steady. The phone buzzed. Brandon's new Instagram story, a wedding bouquet, caption, "Let the show begin." I looked at the line and didn't find it funny. I only felt grateful for that show because I had a script of my own. I switched to the UPS email, 12 document sets ready for pickup. Before I turned the lights off, I walked a slow circle of the study. The wind pushed the curtain to brush the desk's edge. I smoothed the cover corner, closed the pen box, straightened the silver clip my wife used to hold receipts. The room's silence was thick but no longer clotted. It breathed, moving through my lungs without catching. I stood in the doorway and whispered for myself alone. Silence isn't consent, but it isn't empty either. It's where you set posts. Tomorrow I'll raise the first post right in the middle of the party they call particular. On that post I'll hang my name where it belongs. Brandon once smiled across a cafe table, his palm pressed flat like a salesman laying down reassurance. I'll handle everything from A to Z. You just show up and smile. Back then I thought it was courtesy. Turns out smile meant stand still while someone else puppeteers your facial muscles. Today I'll still smile, but it'll be the smile of the man holding the blueprints. My living room turned into a framing shop. The wooden table I built years ago was now buried under white sheets. Stamped copies of the loan, a scan of the forged signature, a photo of the About page with my name on the co-founder line, a transcript pulled from the clip.wav file, USB drives lined up like brand new screws beside a roll of white labels. I drew a breath, pulled the chair close, and began parceling the stacks. I divided 12 sets. Each set had 4 parts. 1, the bank-stamped loan document. 2, a blown-up page of the forged signature. 3, the photos and posts bragging about investment without tagging anyone. 4, a short transcript where Layla sighs and Brandon says, "He's easygoing." I labeled the top right corner, Regina Jenkins, future mother-in-law, Cody Jenkins, Mr. Steele, club, the Whitakers, Miss Ann, the neighbor, Linda, partner, James, Brandon's friend, Sister Mary, church, Walter, blacksmith, Neil, club, Layla's old classmate, and 1 spare. For the cover stock, I chose letter 80 LRB cover, stiff enough that anyone picking it up would feel the weight. The white envelope stayed open, unsealed. I want the rustle right there at the dinner table. In the middle of the paper mountain, my phone lay face down. I flipped it and booked a meeting with a credit attorney. The firm was in a row of red brick buildings. The glass door lettered small. Credit law, identity and fraud. The attorney was Ms. Jameson, hair tied low, voice even. You did the first right thing. Collect evidence before you get angry. Jameson said after skimming the file I brought. Legally, this is identity fraud if the signature's forged and you were never notified. We can send a demand to halt the loan and report it to all three credit bureaus. But I'll give you two strategic paths. Sue now, or make sure the right people witness it before your next move. The right people being who, I asked. The ones who directly shape their social image. The ones who will ask the right questions at the right moment. I'm building that list, Anand, I said. And I need two statements from you in writing. Evidence of signature forgery and no authorization by the subject. I'll phrase them in legal language. Keep them safe. I'm good at keeping things, I said, closing the case. Leaving the office, I pulled over and opened DuckDuckGo. Keywords: Willow Ridge Country Club events. The site slid up with a polished banner. Engagement dinner, Layla and Brandon. Under it was a guest services block promising 12 special guests. No public list, but tagged behind-the-scenes photos happened to expose a few names. I zoomed each shot, Mr. Steele standing by a sponsor poster, Regina Yates in an emerald dress directing the florals, the Whitakers posing with the club logo. I jotted fast. The local paper once called Regina the iron fist in a velvet glove of charity events. At the UPS Print Center, I stepped into the smell of fresh toner and the low purr of commercial printers idling in place. A sign on the wall read, "Your documents are your power." I smiled at the coincidence. The clerk asked, "Big event, sir?" "A celebration of the truth," I said. White covers, black type, bound, each set labeled with the recipient's name. 12 sets, plus one spare. Cover stock? 80 LRB cover. Letter size. Don't crowd the margins. He nodded, fingers skating across the screen. The wide format machine began to swallow paper and spit out sheets, black and white edges sharp as thin knives. I watched, feeling what I feel when the mold comes off a newly cut door. The clean line, the scent of fresh wood, the bite of hinges fitting true. I asked for a cup of black coffee from the Keurig in the corner. The cheap bitterness flashed off fast, but my hands warmed. While the bindings were set, I checked the page order. Start with a cover titled Timeline and Proofs, then Credit Report Anomalies, then Signature Comparison, then Social Media Exhibits, and finally Transcript Excerpt. Clip1.wev. I slid a USB with the originals into each set. The clerk handed me a flat barrel pen to write the names on the labels. The ink sat on the slick paper, black and neat. Seeing the thickness of each packet, he frowned a little. Wow, they'll be reading for a while. I only need them to read the first 3 pages, I said. The rest is for them to ask each other questions. Back home, the living room still smelled like new paper. I stacked the 12 sets like laying a wall of bricks. Each set tucked into an open white envelope, so any curious hand could lift the flap right there. I rehearsed at the table, as if it were the dinner. Right hand on the fork, left hand brushing the envelope. The pitch of paper rustled, tuned to make the whole table turn. I sat and read the names on the labels again. Regina Yates. I pictured her face when she saw Signature Comparison. Not gloating, calm. I don't need them humiliated. I need them to look at the truth. I opened email and drafted a message to the RSVP address printed on the Willow Ridge banner. Subject, RSVP, Hector Grayson. In the body, I typed 4 words, breaking the line like nails into wood. Hector Grayson will attend, bringing a gift. I attached a cover photo of one packet, the corners showing the recipient's name as Regina Jenkins. I sat straight and reread it. Nothing to add, nothing to cut. I hit send. In under 2 minutes, a scene ticked in the secondary inbox. Brandon. I pictured him staring at the screen, his smile flying off like a fly swatted midair. I set the phone face down. The printer on the shelf made a small tack. The scheduled label for the spare was done. Before dark settled, I went to the bedroom and pulled out my old Navy suit. Buttons firm, lapels still standing. I tried it on, smoothed the shoulders, let a long breath out so the fabric hugged my back. I faced the mirror. On the nightstand, the photo from Layla's wedding day. She's seated next to me, chin resting on my arm, eyes smiling all the way to the corners. I touched the frame's edge, then smoothed the lapel. Smile, I told myself softly, but make it the right one. Mine. I went back to the table, laid the suit over a chair, and placed a pale gray tie with it. I pinned on a small lapel pin, the gift my wife gave me on our second anniversary, the head engraved with an H. The room glowed warm. The desk lamp skimmed over the white covers until they looked like a still pond. The phone vibrated. Unknown number. I let it ring one beat, two, then picked up. A woman's voice, rounded and polite, pulled tight like violin string. "This is Regina Yates. I hear you intend to come tomorrow night. I advise you not to." I looked at the row of white envelopes on the table, saw her name on the top one. I smiled, just enough to steady my voice. "See you at the dinner," I said. "I'll bring the gift I mentioned." A half-second of silence. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Grayson." "Maybe," I said, "but this time it's mine to make. Have a good evening." I hung up. Outside, wind swept the porch, nudging the curtain to brush my hand. I set the table again. 12 packets, 12 imagined chairs, 12 faces. I stood a long while listening to my chest, steady like the printer after it clicks off, and understood that waiting is sometimes an action. Night pressed to the glass like ink. I made one last loop of the room, pressed each label's edge, checked the USBs, flipped every envelope to be sure none were missealed. On the wall, the old sticky note still hung, "My name is not decoration." I turned most of the lights off, left a single warm beam trained on the stack. The light held steady. I exhaled, gripped the suit sleeve draped over the chair back, and smiled. The smile nobody taught me and nobody controls. I opened my notebook and bullet-pointed 5 tasks for tomorrow. 1, file the identity fraud report. 2, freeze credit at all 3 bureaus. 3, ask Jameson to send the demand to halt the loan. 4, arrive at Willow Ridge right as guests raise their glasses to open the dinner. 5, hand the first packet to Regina. I added one small line, "No arguing, just present documents." I stapled the corner of a test set. The click drove clean into the paper, neat and true. I tugged an envelope edge, slid the documents in and back out. The paper made just the right sound. Not scratchy, not slick. I stood and paced 3 steps, like a man measuring the slab before setting posts. At the UPS counter this afternoon, there was a sign, "Your documents are your power." I mouthed the words again and felt how the phrase wasn't a slogan anymore. It was my survival plan. Willow Ridge Country Club didn't smell like winter. It smelled like freshly cleaned carpet, just opened red wine, and stories so self-assured they didn't need verification. I pushed open the banquet room door. Crystal chandeliers cast warm gold over round tables draped in white. Embossed menus sat neatly to the right of each knife and fork setting. In the left corner, a small bar where someone was laughing softly, the corner of their mouth hooked like a coat hanger. No one looked at me for longer than a second. I liked that. I wore a navy suit, a gray striped tie, and a lapel pin made from my wife's silver paperclip. A silent sign I was doing the right thing. The cross-body document bag pressed against my chest. 12 envelopes stacked tight as floor tiles. I walked straight to the head table, to the empty chair near Regina Yates. I set the bag by the chair leg, as lightly as laying a plan on a drawing board. A few guests' eyes shifted. Surprise passed over their faces like a thin gust. I pulled out the chair and sat. No one greeted me, no need. Brandon spotted me after half a minute. The smile on his face stuttered, then found its rhythm again, like a trained actor. Layla, at his right hand, held the same graceful poise. Only her eyes gave off the sound of metal clicking. Regina sat in the center, chin slightly lifted, one hand resting on her napkin like it was a rein. Dinner had just passed the main. The menu was immaculate. Heritage roast turkey. I glanced at it and smiled to myself. The maitre d' tapped a glass. Brandon rose, glass in hand, with the stage posture of a startup CEO. He turned to the guests, lifting his voice just enough to bounce off the linen surface. Thank you to family, friends, and especially to those who believed and invested in our journey. Without your support, tonight wouldn't be possible. Glasses clinked, some applause. I raised my glass too. I tipped the rim against the base to make a thin ring of sound, then said loud enough to reach the next table's edge, and thank you to the people who actually paid. The sound in the room dropped as if someone yanked a plug from the speakers. Brandon kept smiling, but a red pin stuck at the corner of his eye. Layla turned her wine glass. Her hand trembled once, stopped, then held. Regina set her glass down without drinking. She turned to me with the polite smile event people use to invite a storm to pass by. I didn't say more. I just reached into the bag and pulled out 12 unsealed white envelopes. Each had a black, all-caps name in the top right corner. I started left to right, laying one in front of each person. Mr. Steele, he nodded on reflex. Whittaker, the couple received theirs like a playbill. Anne, the neighbor, bright-eyed and kind. Linda, the partner, brow pinched, then smoothing. Cody, the future father-in-law, shoulders hitching slightly. I placed the one for Regina Yates in front of her, but didn't push it all the way. I kept it a half-inch back, like holding a brake line. Inside, I said, flat and level, are the transactions, the forged signature, and an audio excerpt. If you've heard I consented, please read page 3. The table's temperature slid from warm to cold in a single sentence. Paper began to rustle, a breath someone didn't swallow in time. Someone else laughed to mend the moment, but the laugh tasted wrong. Brandon tapped his glass again, trying to reel the air back like a balloon on a thin string. He said, Hector, you've misunderstood. This is a private event. Sure, I said. Private enough for the truth to have a seat. Across from me, Mr. Steele opened his envelope and flipped straight to page 3. His eyes skimmed the signature comparison. He frowned. He pinched 2 fingers together to invite the person next to him to look closer. Linda set her phone beside her packet and played the clip from the USB. Layla's voice came through so clear I felt myself stop again at the kitchen door of my old house. Dad won't make a scene. Then Brandon's voice, half confidence, half carelessness. Right, he's easygoing. The murmur spread like ink through water. Regina reached out and set her hand lightly on her envelope, still that half-inch away. She looked at me, the question resting in her eyes, not needing words. I didn't explain. I turned to Layla, her mouth pressed tight, 2 cords in her chin drawing a small crease. She whispered, Please don't do this here. Where would be the right place, Layla? I asked gently. The kitchen? Or in a thanks to our investor email that never mentions my name? Brandon slid in, still trying to float it with a joking tone. Mr. Hector, everyone has their own narrative. I'm not telling a narrative, I said. I'm printing. A few guests stood, phones already at their ears as they drifted toward the bar in the left corner. The hellos were small but urgent. Someone breathed the word compliance. Whitaker turned back to Mr. Steele. You see an issue with the signature, right? He nodded and pointed to the tailstroke, the same line I'd shown Carlene at the clerk's office. I nudged Regina's envelope that last half-inch. She held the edge. I said loud enough for 4 tables. You'll want this when the SEC calls, because they will. Brandon barked a laugh, short and dry, dropping onto the table like a pebble. He said, Let's not bring 3-letter agencies to dinner. It's not tasteful. Taste is how you set a knife and fork, I said, lifting my glass. History gets written with receipts. Layla reached out and touched my arm for the first time all evening. Then she pulled back like she touched a hot pan. Her eyes combed the room for friendly faces. Nobody had the time. The people who mattered were busy reading. I turned the glass, looking through the wine as if through a thin pane. I heard in my head, my father-in-law's voice at the wedding years ago, when he stood and thanked both families for joining hands. I used to believe every marriage begins with gratitude, but gratitude can't be forged. It has its own receipts, not for money, but for honor. Nice speech, I said to Brandon, soft enough to sound like praise. Next time, try the truth. I raised my glass to eye level so the chandelier shattered into small pieces in the dark red. I sent the line straight, no curve. Support isn't a toast, it's a transaction. And I kept every receipt. For 2 seconds, nobody breathed. Then paper rustled again. Regina opened her envelope, steady hand. She turned one page, two, to signature comparison. She lowered her chin and called softly, "Cody." He leaned in. At Regina's eye corner, I saw not anger, calculation. She was tallying the invisible losses, reputation, sponsorships, the network. Her hand came off the wine glass. Brandon said something I didn't catch, because a phone started buzzing in the middle of the table. Everyone, by reflex, glanced at his suit pocket. He pulled it out. The screen went cool blue. A line of text slid up, smooth and cold like an unsheathed blade. SEC investigator. I stood. I didn't need to look at Layla again, but I did. Her mouth opened, then shut. I set my glass down, not finishing the drink. I gathered the bag strap and lifted it, noticing the rest of the 12 envelopes were already gaping open. 12 paper mouths speaking for me. I dipped my head to Regina, a final courtesy. "Enjoy your meal," I said. "That heritage turkey does look like it has plenty of heritage." I turned, chairs scraped, whispers, phone calls slicing the room into straight lines. I stepped out of the chandelier's pool into the darker threshold, where my shadow merged with the hallways. No one stopped me. No need. I'd left them what they had to take home. Truth with a signature. I paused at the doorway for a few beats. The decorative mirrors along the hall reflected my back, and the banquet like a little stage. Through the glass, I saw Mr. Steele on the phone. He tilted his head, hand over half his mouth, eyes no longer casual. Linda pulled a thin notebook and scribbled fast, then moved to the bar and pointed to a quieter corner. Whitaker muttered, "Due diligence." Another cluster of guests huddled, comparing signatures on their screens, pinching in and out as if studying a map. The air in the room changed shape, no longer soft like tablecloth, but stiff like the edge of 80-year-old cover stock. I walked slowly along the carpeted hall that swallowed footsteps. On the walls hung photos of Willow Ridge's old ball seasons, tiers of gowns and reenacted smiles. I remembered another night years ago when I wore the same navy suit at my own wedding. My father-in-law stood then, rested a hand on my shoulder, said our two families were one. He didn't know that sentence would live inside me like a shard of glass. Today it stopped cutting. I'd learned to hold it with cloth. At the end of the hall was a glass door to the terrace. I pushed it open, the night air sliding in with pine and ice. I set both hands on the rail and looked at the black, unrippled lake. Behind me, the ping of glass on plate kept time, a reminder the game inside was still playing. I pulled out my phone and saw a new email from Jameson. Demand to halt loan sent. All 3 credit bureaus received the freeze. Confirmations attached. I smiled. Some soundtracks are for one set of ears. I pocketed the phone. The door opened and a young server stepped out, about to take a drag, then paused when he saw me. He smiled unsure and asked softly, "Seems like, Ms. Regina's a little tense tonight?" "Tension in the right spot reshapes things," and I said, "Do your job well." He nodded, surprised by the answer, and went back in. I stood one more minute, long enough to hear Brandon addressed without the easy tone. "Mr. Hale, excuse me," stiff and distant. I headed back. At the threshold, Regina was on her feet. She didn't look at me. She looked straight across the room like a director resetting everyone's marks. Layla stood near her, one lock of hair out of place. Brendan still stood, phone in hand, thumb trembling along the edge. I passed the table without stopping. Anne caught my hand lightly in thanks. I nodded and kept going. By the exit, a wooden sign with the couple's names leaned against the wall. Layla and Brandon, let love lead. I paused half a second. No argument, no edits. I just took a small sticky note from my pocket, wrote 2 words, let proof lead, and tucked it under the frame with a tiny clip. Maybe no one will notice. I left it for myself as a period. When I pushed through the outer door, the night wind cut across my lapel and made the silver paper clip tap my sternum. I put a finger there and thought about my wife's hand pinning it years ago. Back then, I didn't know what holding the blueprints meant. Now I do. Laying your straight line in a room full of convenient curves. The parking lot lights poured long yellow bars across the pavement. I opened the truck and set the bag on the passenger seat. Inside, one spare packet remained, the 13th. I touched the edge of the cover. Everything had followed the order I drew. Enter at the main course, raise a glass to talk, deliver the packets, let others speak by evidence, and leave before anyone can shrink the truth back into a private matter. I buckled up and started the engine. The radio caught an old country song. I mouthed a few lines, not for nostalgia, but because even a soundtrack needs a beat to breathe after you drive the last nail. The headlights slid over Willow Ridge's stone wall. I didn't check the rear view. I didn't need to. I knew that behind me at least 12 calls would be placed, 3 urgent emails sent, 1 envelope locked in a safe, and 1 phone would buzz again. I set my hands on the wheel and said, quiet as to a mirror, the receipts are out. Forgiving doesn't mean reopening the door. Sometimes the best thing is to lock it and keep the key. My wife said that on a thin snow afternoon, before the pain carried her far from the kitchen, from winter dishes and the steady tick of the coffee maker. Today, that sentence isn't advice. It's my rule. Morning in Casper was clear as glass. White light came through the thin snow pasted to the window, filtering into a pale blue. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the coffee maker hop in a steady rhythm. The travel mug with the Casper Horseman logo lay by the sink, paint chipped at one corner from when I dropped it last week. I poured coffee into it, snapped the lid, let the heat breathe across the back of my hand. On the table, the local paper lay open to page 3. The headline hit my eyes like a fridge door closing. Why Bridge EdTech under investigation for identity fraud. A photo showed Brandon leaving a law office, suit straight, shoulders drawn in, mouth pressed as if swallowing an explanation he hadn't finished thinking up. I read quickly, folded the paper, and set it next to the machine. Outside, the wind nudged the eaves and sent a strip of wind chimes clinking. The phone vibrated on the wooden table. Layla's name lit up. I let it ring 1 full cycle, then picked up. Dad, everything's bad, she said, voice rough like someone who hadn't slept in days. I'm sorry. We need help. I looked at the coffee bead pooling on the travel mug lid and wiped it with my thumb. I left a pocket of silence so my heart could step down a stair. Help pay off debt? I asked slow. Or help patch up a face. On the other end, her breath stumbled for a beat. I don't know who else to. You do, I cut in. You know me, and you still chose to do this. I heard her quiet crying, not sobbing, just the sound of someone keeping their face from breaking. I looked out the window, the lawn covered in a thin snow, last night's cat prints half erased by wind. I wanted to say something soothing, the habit of many years, but I tightened my hand around the travel mug to keep warm. I forgive you, Layla, I said low, but the door stays closed. Silence on the line. Then a small, okay, I hung up. Not angry, not lighter, just steady. By the entryway, my boots wore a white crust of yesterday's road salt. I put them on, shrugged into my coat, and slid the folded paper into the inside pocket. The post office is 5 minutes' drive. The automatic door opened and warm air rushed my face. Inside, rows of locked boxes stood like drawers of memory. I picked up packages for neighbors on my street, and the clerk slid over a thick envelope stamped U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Addressee, Hector Grayson. Second line, co-founder, Y-Bridge EdTech LLC. I lifted the envelope. The paper felt stiffer than usual, the kind not used for apologies. Misaddressed, I said. The correct address is Brandon Hale's place, but the old records still have my name. The clerk looked at me and recognized the name from the paper. There was no judgment in her eyes, just that small-town twinge of regret you give each other when you see someone miss a step. Want us to forward it? No need, I said. I'll be passing by. On the way home, I turned into Layla's neighborhood. The Christmas lights from last season still hung, a crust of snow sparkling on the strands like sea salt. Brandon's mailbox was painted red, iced with a thin glaze. I cut the engine and stepped out. The snow compressed under my boots with a low note. I lifted the box lid. The hinge clicked softly. Inside was empty. I placed the SEC envelope in, face down so the addressee wouldn't show from the street. No note. In my head, a sentence wanted to jump out. When the SEC calls, don't say you didn't know. I swallowed it. My silence today had its own job. I stood there a few seconds more. Along the lid's edge, a film of ice gave just enough reflection. The mirror showed a middle-aged man in a clean old coat, eyes no longer wet. I closed the lid. Wind moved through the trees, carrying fresh pine. The hollow bean sat on the corner across from the shoe shop. I pushed the door. The bell went ting, and coffee mingled with waffle scent. The corkboard by the counter carried a poster. Winter Craft Fair, free entry. Little tear-off notes offered woodwork, ukulele lessons, weekend babysitting. Mike sat at the back table, gray beanie on, hands cupped around a mug like holding fire. Hey, hero, without a loudspeaker, Mike winked as I sat. At that party, you taught them a lesson without shouting. What's shouting for? I shrugged. When the truth is big enough. Mike laughed. He told me the drill I loaned him last year helped fix the hallway. His daughter doesn't trip on the stairs now. We talked about how long the snow might hang on, whether the Horsemen have a shot at the playoffs this year, and how the shop just switched roasts. At the next table, two old friends debated bringing apple pie or pumpkin to the winter fair. The small world opens a passage for breathing. I sat and listened to people, the grinder, the tap of a spoon on ceramic. Nobody said the letters SEC. That's how I knew I was in the right place. By noon, the light spread white like a thin cloth across town. I parked under the awning, hung my coat on the hook by the door. The house was quiet. On the living room wall, the run of frames was still there. My wedding, Layla's 10th birthday, the mountain trip when she was 14. I stepped over and lifted Layla's wedding photo off its nail. In it, I'm grinning wide. Layla holds flowers. Brandon stands beside her. I touch the frame's edge. Cold wood. I opened the keepsake box, patted it with newspaper, and set the photo down. I closed the lid and labeled it with a small tag. Closed. I didn't throw it away, I stored it. On the shelf, my wife's photo stayed in the center, unmoved. She looked at me like that thin snow afternoon. The phone buzzed. A text from Layla. Dad, if we could talk. I set my palm on the screen for warmth, then swiped right and opened a different thread. Mike had sent a line. BBQ Sunday, bring the potato salad. I smiled and replied, wouldn't miss it. I watched my words go and felt light, like a door opening to the porch. I brewed another pot of tea but didn't drink yet. I walked the hall and checked the back door, the laundry room window, the front door. Each lock sat in the right notch. I stood at the main door with my hand on the bolt and imagined my wife's voice. Forgiveness isn't reopening. I said it out loud so the house could hear. I forgave you, but the door stays closed. Not a sentence. A boundary. I love my daughter by not letting her step on what I've built. I went back to the kitchen, took a roll, spread butter, sprinkled a little pink salt. The light on the table slid back slowly, throwing the Horseman travel mug into a long shadow. I clicked on the small radio on the microwave shelf. An old country song came into the room like a friend who knows how to talk less. I ate slowly, chewing well. At a certain age, you learn to keep your heartbeat from chasing someone else's phone. In the afternoon, I drove to the market and bought potatoes, celery, eggs, and yellow mustard. I told myself to make a good potato salad for Sunday. Mike says it'll warm up just right that day. At the checkout, the clerk asked, "Nice out today, sir?" I said, "Nice enough for a man willing to look straight at tomorrow." She smiled and beeped each item through. The day leaned toward evening. I went home, washed dishes, wiped the table. I took the photo box from earlier and slid it deeper into the cabinet. I stood a long moment, looking at the clean space on the wall where the picture had been. The empty looked good. I didn't need to fill it yet. When the fresh flakes started, I put on my coat and opened the front door. Cold air came in like a polite guest, stopping at the threshold to wait for an invitation. I turned off every light inside except the pale porch lamp. I stepped onto the stoop. From behind, if anyone were there, they'd see only a man's silhouette blending into snowlight. I inhaled deep, the pine, the cold metal, the gathered smell of a small city in my lungs. I pulled the door closed behind me. Night arrived on the softest sounds. I didn't leave the key in the lock. I put it in my pocket with a small slip of paper bearing my wife's reminder. Lock the door and keep the key. I looked at the snow-covered road and felt a smile come on its own. Thin enough. If you enjoyed the story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts about it in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.